Oh, oh, good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you being here with us today. We are going to cover two topics that we think will be beneficial for our second webinar. As a reminder, we're going to be doing these monthly on the the fourth Tuesday of each month. Just again, excited that you're here. We're going to be covering our financial fitness checklist for 2024, just to help you be mindful of things that are coming up or things that you might not have thought about for this year, just to see how they might be impacting you. And then as you're going through that checklist, just to give you that opportunity so that afterwards we can follow up and just see if there's any areas where we have any hit marks that we just need to address, and just make sure that we're accounting for as we go through the year, just to make sure we're on the same page, but just to make sure you've got good guidance and, looking at the best way to tackle that. And then on the back end, going to cover the all important and pressing issue of how the election year affects our investments, and just have a great little bit of information and a few slides to cover with you in that area. As we kind of dive in, we've got Kevin, Kelly, Emmett Corboy, and myself presenting today. And like I said, we're just thankful that you're with us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Emmett.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. So as he mentioned, we're going to start with, kind of reviewing a financial fitness checklist. And hopefully, as you've registered, you got a PDF to this document that we'll be kind of, referencing today. My goal for today is to, kind of not go through each and every one of the questions on this checklist, but kind of put into context why these are important within your overall financial situation, how they can impact other areas of your finances, other areas of your life, and areas where it might make sense for us to collaborate and discuss that within your overall financial plan as well. So hopefully you have that PDF handy and have had a chance to kind of go through it. But one thing that I'll say before we hop into this as well is, year over year, it's always good to just kind of do a quick little check in on where you're at as well. What's important now that maybe wasn't as important before? What may have changed? What's still the same? Is there a goal that you've been tracking toward for years and years? How is your progress toward that? Right. So that's a bit of, what we'll kind of get into today. So the financial fitness checklist does address these 9 different areas. And I believe we're kind of skipping through 1 or 2 of these as well that might not be pertinent for everybody on the call. But we will touch on family, goals, business, work, health, money, estate, retirement, and your future as well. So without further ado, let's get financially fit, right? All right, everybody hopefully is doing your calisthenics, but this is that checklist that I mentioned, and we will pop right in with the family, right? So first question, do you expect any changes in your financial status, right? Obviously, I'm sorry, your relationship status. Obviously, this can be a pretty major one, right? If you're getting married, if you're, cohabitating with a partner, or, if you're unfortunately facing a divorce, that can, really impact your overall finances and, impact just the total composition of everything as time goes on, right? One area that we get questions on a lot is, as people get married, how do I blend my finances with another person, right? I've been doing this on my own, right? How do we start to, kind of blend things together from a joint banking standpoint to a sharing of bills standpoint to just making sure that you're on the same page from a financial standpoint. And we can certainly help with that. We always encourage, couples to, sit down with us as their financial coach or counselor or advisor on a, joint basis, so that we can kind of have those discussions and make sure that, all parties are, on the same page and tracking toward the same thing, right? Another one that I thought, would be important to highlight here is, if you have a child or dependent, or a family member in general with special needs. This is something that not necessarily is just like a once a year type of thing to think about. Depending on the special needs that they may have, you may need to seriously look at like some longer term planning scenarios, and consider things such as, special needs trusts, or, ways that you can, work with government programs like Medicaid to ensure that they're, able to get the, resources to care for their needs, and also to make sure that, in the event that their primary caretaker is not here, that, their, resources are positioned in a way that it's not going to preclude them from, being recipient of something like SSI, or, SSDI, or, just all the different Medicaid resources that come about as well. The last one here on family that I'll highlight, those last two questions. Do you have any adult children moving back in with you? Or do you have an elderly parent in need of financial help? In need of financial or caregiving support? Some folks who are maybe, baby boomers or nearing retirement have been, kind of put into a sandwich type of position where both of those could be happening at the same time. And if that's the case, then, we should definitely sit down and have a conversation to see, how that can impact you personally from a financial standpoint as well. So transitioning into your goals, the big thing, like I said, annually, it's good to do a check-in and just see, the progress that you're making towards your different goals. But, think about, things like a major vacation, right? Maybe there's a big trip that you've been wanting to do for years and years, whether it's, taking the kids to Disney, or a retirement trip like an Alaskan cruise, right? Have you not only planned for all of the things that you're going to do there, but have you planned for how that's going to be paid for, right? Is it something where, a credit card bill is going to be racked up and then the rest of the year you're spent paying this off? Or do you have other resources, liquid savings, liquid investments that can be utilized for a major trip like that, right? Same thing when you think about a major renovation, right? This could be on a even larger scale though, right? If you're, like many Americans out there, where you love the home that you're in and you love your interest rate, but maybe you need a little bit more space, or maybe you really want that deck that you see in the home and garden TV shows and everything. Well, how are you going to pay for that renovation? Right? Is it something where you're going to cash flow it? Is it something that, you're going to, take out a home equity line of credit, which can potentially be a great option, where you're essentially using your home's equity to, pay for that renovation, and you make payments on a, monthly basis from there? Or are you going to be liquidating, investments to pay for that? So these are the types of things, that, are important to think about when it comes to these matters as well. This is one of the factors that impact us on a day-to-day basis, most when it comes to our finances, which is your work, right? Your primary employment. Are you or your spouse anticipating changing jobs this year? Right? If so, how is that going to impact, your monthly cash flow? How is it going to impact your ability to save and invest for the future? Right? When you think about your job security, right? If you're, worried about your job security, think about if my, position were eliminated, do I have a safety net or a nest egg to fall back on to make it through for a period of 3 or 6 months while I'm looking for that new position as well, right? Hit the next one there, Josh. Health, right? So when we think about, our health, this can, in some ways, be taken for granted, right? A lot of times we get up, each and every day and feel well and feel healthy. But major health issues can come up out of nowhere, right? And that can, honestly derail, a financial plan as well, right? So, are you unfortunately in a spot where you or a close family member have a serious illness, right? Have you had to think through all those scenarios of, if I miss, work, right? What does that do, right? Do I have, disability coverage in place, or, other things to fall back on, right? And the last thing I'll kind of, point out with this, when you look at that, completing an advance directive for healthcare, this can be one of the most important, legal documents to have in place. And we'll reference kind of a few different, legal documents throughout this. But the reason why this is important is it allows you to, extend your wishes and kind of voice out your wishes in the event that you're unable to speak, right? So, if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to speak with an attorney to, look at things like an advance directive and some of the other things that we'll talk about here as well. Your money, right? So a lot of times when people think about their financial advisor, this is all they think about, which, we're honored to be, in that thought space, because, a lot of the conversations that we have with our clients, does pertain to your money, right? Your investment portfolio, your resources, your income, your cash flow. But, hopefully you'll see that we, care about much more than just that, right? But as we, talk about your money and this scenario here, do you have concerns about your investment portfolio? We've seen the market do some amazing things in the past 12 to 15 months, right? We've had a big rebound from, the pullback that we saw in 2022, right? Are you in the right spot, right? Have you had a risk checkup recently, right? We've got a really great tool that allows us to pinpoint what your risk number is to, really determine the amount of return that you're looking for, which everybody wants. Just, I want to grow, but also just as importantly, the amount of risk that you're comfortable with, right? And so if you haven't done this in a couple of years, it might be good to do just a risk checkup to ensure that you're on the right track with that as well. Another thing that I'll, point out right now, one thing that's top of mind is taxes, right? So as you're, completing your tax returns, take special note, do a special, quick, 15-minute extra review on that, whether it's, you by yourself or with your accountant, or we would, also love to look at those with you as well to see, are there ways that you can reduce your tax bill, right? Are there things that we can do within your investment portfolio or within how you're saving on an annual basis that can lower how much, you pay each year as well, right? Moving on to your estate. So, the first question here is a great one, right? Will your net worth total more than $13 million in 2024? We would be blessed to be in that category for sure, right? And you might say, well, that's kind of an odd number. How did they come up with that? That's the number in which the federal estate tax, kicks in, right? So if you have more than $13 million, that's when you're, subject to the estate tax. Most of our clients are in the state of Virginia, where there is no estate tax or death tax. But obviously there can be, taxes on different accounts when they pass to beneficiaries. So, that's something that, is important to kind of look at. Other things to kind of, touch on here, as far as legal documents go, obviously, will is one of, the first ones that a lot of people think about. And, it's good to get that set up, when you're young, married, having children. But a lot of times we see folks who haven't touched it for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And it's important to update that from time to time as well, because things change and people change and your wishes may change, right? So you may want to just, dust off the will and, take that to a local attorney as well and get that updated.
Can I tag something on
Um,
there a minute, really quick?
yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to throw out there with respect to those documents, and just as important as this, this checklist and those things, making sure that the people that are involved in that process have an idea of where those documents are located is always just a good practice. So obviously just making sure it's up to date and in line with your current wishes, but making sure that those family members or people who might be appointed to be an administrator of an estate or something like that have a good, clear idea of where to locate that so that they can enact those wishes.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're entrusting somebody, especially like, a situation where you have young children, right? And you're entrusting somebody to be the guardian of your children if you're not here, might want to make sure that they're okay with that, and make sure that they know, what to do and where to go and, how to carry out your wishes as well, right? Another thing that I'll point out here, the question in the middle of the page, are your life insurance policies more than 5 years old, right? Now, typically a lot of times you buy a life insurance policy to protect where you're at and protect your needs in the event that you're not here anymore. And then a lot of people don't think about it anymore, right? But as time goes on, your need for coverage changes. And another thing that's happened is there have been a lot of changes within the life insurance industry and with life insurance companies over the last 5 years. So if you haven't reviewed those policies, it might be that you have the proper amount of coverage in place, but it could be that you could actually get it for less money now, with a newer policy as well. So it could be something to kind of, look at and think about. Next one that we'll talk about is your retirement. So, one area that, we see oftentimes is that as people change jobs, I heard a statistic one time that the average American holds anywhere from 7 to 10 jobs over their like working career, their professional career. Honestly, that number seems like it might be a little bit low with as much like, job changing as people are doing. But when you think about it, as you add into a 401k, you put money aside, when you change jobs, you may want to consider, what am I doing with that prior retirement plan, right? What's a way that you can organize that, and as time goes on, it's important to just check back and look at, any prior retirement plans that may have been intentionally or inadvertently left at a prior company as well. Another thing to kind of touch on here, as we have folks who are getting toward the required minimum distribution age. As you build assets in retirement accounts, the government, the IRS actually requires that you pull money out from there. Right. And so, it's important to, make sure not only that you're taking the right amount out from those accounts, but also that, your account and your portfolio is set up properly, set up in a way that can, sustain those distributions as well. Right. The amount that's required to be withdrawn is actually increases each and every year, which can put a pretty, big strain as time goes on your, retirement asset. So what we do is we look at your, IRA, 401k and ensure that you're positioned to, sustain that income without, substantial investment portfolio risk as well. And last one I think that I'll touch on here is your future. Overall, think about, down the road, right? Think about your future. As you think about that, you want to make sure that you have a good, solid plan in place, right? And that plan can be, written and that, you're financially organized. If you need help with that, that's what we're here for. we have some excellent resources, a dynamic client portal that you can, log into on your computer, on your phone. There's an app that you can, get into at any point in time to help you with that financial organization, right? But think also about, your future in a sense of what happens if you don't have income, right? How long can you, get by without dipping into your retirement or other long-term accounts? Generally speaking, for most professions, I think, 6 months is a good kind of rule of thumb to have there. And if you need help with, maybe you're not there and you need help with building up that reserve, right? That's another thing that we would love to talk with you about, is how you can do that. Right? Another thing in your future to think about is, when you should apply for Social Security, right? For some folks who are in, kind of mid-career or, early career, this is, less than an afterthought. But if you're retired, or if you're close to retirement, right, it's important to take a look at your Social Security benefit and, see, the track that you're on, the amount that you're paying into Social Security, how that impacts your future benefit, and ultimately when it's best to turn that stream of income on as well, right? So again, we've got some great tools that we can look at, with you, and we would love to have that conversation. So if you do not have the copy of the financial fitness checklist, then reach out to us. We will certainly get a copy to you. And if you've filled that out already, we'd love to take a look at it with you and just have a quick conversation and discuss, anything that maybe needs addressed within your overall, financial strategy as well. Right. So if anybody has any questions regarding, the financial checklist or anything along those lines, you can enter that into the Q&A feature, and we can, take a minute to, talk through that. If not, then we will just head into our coverage of investing in an election year, which Josh is going to walk us through some just important things to keep in mind as far as this goes as well.
Yeah, thanks for passing it back to me, Emmett. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I get to bring an exciting topic to the lunch table here. We get to talk about money and politics, which are the two taboo things that often come up, but important nonetheless. And I find that, as we go through election cycles, whether it's on 2 years or 4 years, this is just something that's constant and always kind of at the forefront of some of our questions and concerns. And does it impact the market? And just what's going to happen when, things change, and that's pretty normal. One of the most curious things that we found as we were just looking at some of this data that we're going to share with you is that, mostly speaking, that markets are pretty unbiased as to which person or party comes into office. And I'll show you that, how that's kind of looked over time. And, our primary season, which we're going through right now, I think last year in 2023 with the Republican Party in particular, I think they had 23 people who had effectively entered into that race, and now we're down to 2. And they tend to create a lot of volatility just because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of change, but generally markets bounce back and perform pretty strongly. And that time of primaries is generally, like I said, running through this year of the general election to the end of May is kind of what we're looking at, because everything's kind of satisfied and fulfilled there as far as votes are concerned as to who will be on our ballot for November. And so obviously with all the change and things being uncertain, that creates a little bit of nervousness. And we typically see a lot of people will be inclined to move funds into cash. But what we generally would advise you, obviously across the board, is to just invest for the long term. And as we kind of do the financial fitness checklist, if we have a good plan of your goals and we can kind of anticipate changes that are coming your way, we can better plan and prepare for them, but also stay on course and not let noise, whether it's an election or just just general information. It could be wars or anything that we've seen and kind of experienced and come through on the other side. Especially if you look back at 2020 with COVID and things like that. I mean, there's always something that kind of comes into the fold that changes the dynamic, but ultimately the bottom line is that we just want to have a strong game plan. And we just know that, that pessimism of staying on the side has rarely paid off for most folks. Because one of the statistics that I had was that stocks have generally returned about 11.3% in the 12 months following election primaries. So it creates a great opportunity. And when you compare it to just non-election years that have had basically returns of about 5.8%. So even though there's volatility, that still creates opportunity. All right. So as we look at this chart going back to 1923, we know that investing during an election year or staying invested can be tough, especially on your nerves. And this year probably will promise to be no different. So we'll have emotions and different biases that we want to just be wise to kind of tune those out and just kind of focus on what your goals are and what's important to you. And ultimately what we found, and I don't want this to kind of throw water on the fire, but essentially the election years have had no difference when it comes to long-term investment returns in the market as we look at them. As I mentioned before, what should be kind of the catalyst for all things is just kind of staying invested and finding a way to have that long-term plan. Because if we look back basically on in this chart, we said, look, if $1,000 was invested in the S&P when FDR took office, it would be worth over $19 million as of June of 2023. It's pretty remarkable to think about that growth, considering all things that our nation's been through, not just counting elections. So we definitely want to take that into consideration as we plan for our future and kind of look at it both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So all the economic and political challenges, they may seem unprecedented. But again, as we look at past election cycles, any controversy and uncertainty, that have come with basically every campaign that we've ever seen, market continued to be pretty resilient over that time. So staying the course and that sort of thing is really what's led to investor success. And that's what we care about most for you. Looking at it from that standpoint. One of the things, as I mentioned just previously, is that markets just in general hate uncertainty, and that's what creates that volatility or the up and down that we see, whether, like I said, most recently, whether it was during COVID or even in 2022 when we saw interest rate hikes. With the pandemic, it was how long is it going to last? Is it going to last? What's going to happen with this? How are things going to continue to play out? It's just that unknown. And it's like that for many of us. We hate the unknown, we hate uncertainty, and we hate that challenge of change that comes in our path. Again, with many candidates on the trail, that's going to happen every 2 and 4 years where we'll have a little bit of boat rocking. But what we want to just illustrate is that volatility is pretty short-lived. And after the primaries are over, generally around the end of May, and candidates are selected, the markets tend to kind of return to like a normal upward trajectory. So, anything that we can look back and glean off of this is that, generally patient investors are rewarded. We know that stocks will tend to gain, especially after that 12 months following that primary cycle where things tend to kind of stabilize and go from there. So as we dial in and go from high to, more micro level, it'd be great if there was go-to sectors in the economy that we could invest in every election year. But investing isn't really that simple. Every election cycle brings its own parade of candidates. So they're all going to have policy agendas or different areas of the economy that they would like to focus on. And it'll impact businesses in the way that, our country, provides output each and every year. So the market winners and losers are a little tricky to predict. For example, if we take healthcare, it's been in the crosshairs for a number of election cycles, especially when you look at like rhetoric over like drug pricing and that's put pressure on many stocks in like pharmaceutical and managed care industries. But, other sectors have also had similar bouts with weaknesses, just give or take what, someone's platform is that they're running on that they hope to, elicit change in. So it doesn't necessarily mean you should avoid any particular sector. And we referred to someone who is a portfolio manager, and he said, in the 37 years that he's been, managing portfolios, when everyone's worried about a new government policy that's going to come along and destroy a sector, usually that concern is almost generally overblown. So, regardless of who wins, stocks will straddle long-term fundamentals, just meaning that, they're good businesses at their core. They generally will often rally, once that campaign spotlight fades. And so again, with that pre-market turbulence that, that comes along with the primaries and the build up to the general election that we'll have in November, it can create often really great buying opportunities that, again, if you can maintain the right point of view and look for strength and just tolerate short-term volatility. So as we kind of talk about what mistakes often occur for investors, again, I mentioned it's pretty common for us to be nervous heading into this year. And you're not alone. That's very, very normal. Candidates often draw attention to many of our problems. So that's going to be at the forefront of what everybody's discussing. It's like, hey, I'm going to run to fix the problems that are out here, right? So it's going to be full of negativity, and that's going to spur volatility as well. So, it's no wonder that, as investors kind of look out at the year ahead, your pessimism towards everything will tend to rise as well. So, what we don't want to have is have your mood or your emotions start to affect your money. And so it shows that, like in this chart, as a, an election cycle tends to unfold and we get into year 4 where the actual new election is going to take place, history shows that, investors have a tendency of pouring money into just basically money market or cash funds. And it makes sense why you would think that that would be logical, because you're minimizing volatility for more consistency and predictability. But it often always happens that way. Money flows out of the markets and into cash. And you can see that, that's kind of illustrated by this chart. So we see greater inflows immediately afterwards. And then the inverse happens right after the election, because I said, short-term volatility can often be overblown, and then things kind of return to normal. So what happens is that, money flows back out of cash into the markets, essentially after the storm blows over, so to speak. And so it just suggests that folks obviously want to minimize risk and wait for uncertainty to subside. But, market timing as just something that we would just throw caution as an investor to is rarely a winning long-term strategy, because it can pose a problem for your portfolio returns. So as we look at this next slide, traditionally what we looked at is kind of 3 scenarios, and it's like, look, if I were to stay fully invested, how would I end up over any given election cycle? So the dark blue bar basically indicates someone basically had $10,000 that they had invested. And as we look back over the last 22 investment cycles, this person with $10,000 obviously would have ended up with north of $15,000, $15,865. And that would have been a winning strategy in 14 of the last 22 election cycles. Okay. So just by leaving it invested, because again, we had a strategy, and Emmett had talked about it a little bit earlier, as far as looking at your goals as far as this year goes, what's coming our way, because again, if we have our money positioned in different places, it allows us to stay invested in other places, because we know that things like emergencies and short-term plans for trips or renovations or healthcare can all be covered by knowing kind of what we're going to do with some of our money. That way we don't have to push everything over to cash specifically. The second scenario, the lighter blue color, basically assumes that, this person still had the same amount of money. However, what they did was very similar to what many of you may do through your retirement plans at work, where you're doing what we call dollar cost averaging, or just doing payroll contributions, meaning that you had 10,000, but over that course of that election cycle, you slowly brought the same amount of money in. So equivalently, it's the second best strategy just by the numbers, where we had 5 out of 22 election cycles where this actually ended up being the best alternative to go into it. So as a second runner up, it's better to kind of, like I said, keep bringing money into the markets over a period of time if you're timid and don't want to risk any short-term volatility, to kind of make sure that it's just not idly sitting in cash, which the third scenario basically says, look, I'm just going to ride this thing out. And then immediately after that election cycle is complete for that 4 years, I'm going to basically bring my money back into the markets after the fact. So you can still see here that, $10,000, grew well over that period of time. It just left some money on the table. So, as we're kind of saying, there are different strategies that you can take. We first and foremost want to make sure that we've got a good bearing on your risk. But some of the things that we think we're doing to be more preventative can actually work against us in a general sense. So I know that was a pretty high overview with investing during the election cycles, but it still goes back to those core catalysts. Is that mostly what we want you to know is to stay the course. We know that investing long term is ultimately the best move for our clients, so that we aren't caught up in short term movements and panic buying or selling in any sort of environment. And we want to do everything with that conscientious in mind, and just make sure that we've got a strategy behind why we're doing what we're doing, and just hope that helps kind of give a little bit of clarity to this current year ahead as things do get volatile in this part of the year. But we're optimistic based on the past data that we'll see strong performance from the companies that we invest in, and just investing in good quality companies is what we're looking at doing with you as well.
Just realized I was on mute as I was thanking you so much, Josh, for all of that info. That was great. One that definitely stuck out to me was just kind of that, almost opposite type of, flow that you would want to have on just a couple of slides ago. What mistakes do investors often make? Where you had referenced that the S&P 500 or the stock market tends to average about 11.3% return in the 12 months following primaries, but that's when people seem to be loading up on cash as much as possible, right? So they're missing out on that great potential return. So it's good not only with the election, but just the financial checkup as a whole, just to maybe sit down and do a review. So certainly reach out to us and schedule some time that we can discuss this in the context of your personal financial situation, and just how everything kind of all fits together to have a great plan for 2024 and beyond. Right. So I don't see anything in the Q&A, but I want to thank everybody for hopping on today, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.